All right, in this video, we are going to look at some IUL policies, one particular, and then one in the next video, where we are going to look at some actual performance. Really, the purpose of this is to provide transparency specifically around annual statements. Because when I look at an annual statement on an indexed universal life insurance policy, it can look fantastic. It can look like I've earned 10%, maybe even something like 50%. However, when I look at the reality, is that what I'm actually earning on the policy? And you can make the exact same argument with whole life insurance. I can take a whole life insurance policy with a 6% dividend rate and say, hey, you're earning a 6% dividend rate. You can borrow at 5%. The thing is, the dividend rate is what? A gross rate that is credited after the company's insurance expenses, mortality charges. I want to look at the net internal rate of return, both the annual internal rate of return and also the average internal rate of return. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So, have you ever heard, with an indexed universal life insurance policy, I earned 10% last year. This is fantastic, and you earn that with no risk in the market, because with an IUL, we do have the potential to go nowhere but up over time. But I've earned 10%, no risk, and it was tax-free. This is the best thing since sliced bread, man. Let me put all my money in this. I'll have north of $1 million and can pull out $150,000 per year in retirement, and it's all tax-free. So as I mentioned those 2 bullet points up top, how does that sound? Like, if that was real, is that something you would want? That's something I would want, definitely. There's always a catch, though. Anytime we look at cash value life insurance, what I am most interested in is actual data, because where cash value life insurance is sold so frequently is based on an illustration, which is a projection that makes the values look fantastic long term, particularly with an IUL, but where buyer's remorse comes into the equation and where it potentially does not work, and often does not work, is that those illustrations, projections, in terms of reality, tend to under-deliver. We're going to look at actual proof. Every IUL we've ever seen has under-delivered in terms of actual performance. And this is why we don't use them as a company. Once I see the proof, we'll consider it. Same thing with smaller whole life insurance companies. We always talk about whole life insurance with what companies? Properly designed with the 4 major mutual companies: Mass Mutual, Guardian, New York Life, and Northwestern Mutual. Simple reason is they have consistently delivered strong actual internal rates of return to consumers. For banks and corporations that we work with, we use those companies. There's a reason for that. So, same thing with an IUL. I want to see the transparency, the actual data. Does it work? Can it work? Yes, but does it work? That's what I want to see. And just to clarify one extremely important point here. When I look at actual performance, what my money is actually growing by, an annual statement that shows a number and return, what I earned that particular year, is not valid. I'll take the thing and throw it out the window because it's not real. And you're going to see exactly what I mean here. What I want to look at, what we are going to look at, I should say, we've got 2 case studies here. One of a 35-year-old male. He took a policy out in 2008, pays in $24,000 per year, and then a 46-year-old male, also who received a preferred rating, both different insurance companies. The 46-year-old male funded the policy for a shorter time frame, really condensing the funding. But here's what we're going to examine. In this video, we're just going to look at the 35-year-old male. As we dig into this, IUL, annual statement versus internal rate of return. So the IRR, internal rate of return, what that is, what that means on a life insurance policy, is the actual growth after the company's insurance expenses, mortality charges, everything. What is the net growth? What did I actually see it go up by in value or down in value? So the annual statement might show, call it 10%. So if I see that on an annual statement, that's what it earned. I mean, that's what common sense would tell me. The reality, though, is when I look at the annual internal rate of return, meaning I had $100,000 in cash value, and now I actually have $105,000. If it grew by $5,000, what would that annualized internal rate of return be? 100 to 105? 5%. That's the net growth. And then the average, well, I've got 14-year average. You're going to see this in the case study. That might be 4%. Might be a lot less. We'll see what this case study is. Could be higher too. Same thing with whole life. So I want to be transparent here. With a whole life insurance policy for 2021, I might see a company publish or advertise a dividend rate of 6%. Yet that annual internal rate of return might fall around 4.5%. Meaning after the company's insurance expenses, mortality charges, everything, that's what I will actually see the policy grow by. Then the average internal rate of return depends on the time period. But this is based off of actual data we've seen. This is really what people like to look at. Well, annual and average, but the sophisticated investors, business owners, people that are putting in between $500,000 and $1 million per year that we work with, they look at that. Both of them too. They like the annual if they're looking to leverage the policy with something else as an asset to obtain a collateral loan or something like that. But the average is what they look at. So I want to copy the wealthy. When we look at big banks and corporations, they look at both annual and average, but they like to focus on that average too to say, okay, this is going to look the least attractive compared to all of the assumptions. That's what I want to see. And if I'm comfortable with that, everything else is great. But don't try and show me the best numbers to win the sale, Steve. And then if it underperforms, I'm going to fire you. Like, that's not, no thanks. I'm going to set expectations properly. Be upfront with people. This is the key. So let's have some fun with this. We are going to take a look at an actual policy here. What we'll start with is the annual statement. So what we've got is a policy that was issued January 10th, 2008, 35 mail, preferred. Here's the issue date, January 10th. The company, we took the name off. I put this in here because I wanted to have some fun. A-rated company and a popular IUL because it is. And what do we have here? Accumulated value since he started the policy, January 10th, 2008, $337,000, a little bit more. Interest earned this particular year, $20,402. So that was the actual interest earned per the statement when he received this. We're going to see what the actual return is here. It's on the statement as well, but it comes out to a little over 6.8%, 6.86 to be precise. But this year it's showing, okay, $20,000 in interest. Now as we continue to scroll down, we see the amount available for loan, $253,000. The reason why it's that is he does have a loan outstanding. However, this is a participating policy, meaning he is still earning the same indexed crediting rate on any money in cash value and what he loaned out. If you're familiar with whole life insurance, that would be the equivalent to a non-direct recognition treatment or non-direct recognition policy. Everything receives the same dividend, regardless if it is in cash value or loaned from the policy. Okay, let's continue on here. Here's what I want to look at. Let's make this a little bit bigger because I don't want to have something with blurry numbers that I can barely see. So what we've got, different strategies as far as where his money is invested, and this was not a policy we put in force, to be clear. He's got a fixed account at 3%, and he's got a small allocation of cash value there, 1.73%. But then these are two point to point. I can scroll over S&P 500 index strategies, 7.48%, 6.25%. That was the actual interest rate credited based on his allocation, which resulted in this, the actual interest earned for $20,402, the number we saw before. Now on the far right, we see what? The beginning accumulated value at $300,000. He made premium payments of $24,000. There's his interest earned. Now what do we have here? I do like how this is disclosed. Cost of insurance, rider charges, and contract expenses. Okay, so I do see some expenses there. We don't always see everything there. Full transparency is not always provided. But ending accumulated value is what? $337,606. Okay, so I started out $300,000 the year prior. I paid in $24,000 and it grew to $337,000. All right, let's continue on. Here's where it gets interesting. Let me shrink this down a bit actually. Much better. Okay, so what do we see on the left? Indexed strategy history. This part's interesting. Current year, what he earned this year based on the $20,223 in interest, 6.86%. Last year, 6.32%. 2 years ago, what did he earn? 9.15%. That was a good year. $20,000 in interest. So I want to be clear about something here. If I'm a consumer and I receive this, and I'm not an expert in the field of cash value life insurance, this looks good and it makes me think this is what I'm actually earning. The question is it actually what I'm earning? This client figured it out. He's crunching the numbers on his policy and he's saying, okay, this is kind of frustrating me because they're telling me I'm earning this, but when I look at the cash value growth, that's not what it's growing by. So why is there a difference? And why do people just say, hey, here's your statement, you're earning all this money? Like, we gotta be transparent and upfront with this stuff. We cannot play games. It's people's money that we're dealing with. Sorry when I get emotional about this, but we see this happen way too much. So here's the loan info. Again, it's non-participating, so we don't need to look at that, but here's what I can look at. Additional details, here's an important piece of information. Total premiums paid since he opened the policy, $312,000. Keep that number in mind. Also keep this number in mind. What he was told he earned this year, 6.86%, $20,000 plus. Okay, if we look at the next page, this isn't really important. Actually, one thing is good to look at. If we look at the far right, let me start here. We've got two S&P 500 index strategies. But if we look at the far right, first you see your indexed cap rate, 9.75%, 7.25%. Indexed earnings participation rate, 100% and 140%. Indexed earning rate, look at that, did quite well. Market's been doing quite well in recent years, especially the S&P 500. So it should be doing well. And when I look at the statement, looks fantastic, as my friend would say. Focus on the numbers. Going back to this right here. Here's what I want to focus on. Total premiums paid also. Let's get this all on one shot. There we go. So I earned 6.86%. Premiums paid $312 over the past 13 years. I'm in year 14 now. Let's have some fun. So what we did was took his actual policy. He started at age 35. Now we do not have the data from all the prior annual statements. We've done that with some case studies. As we obtain that data, we'll certainly share it. But that is time consuming for the client and for us. But what we do have is data that he's paid in $24,000 every single year. We have his cost basis. A couple things here. We're going to look at the net cash value growth, the annual internal rate of return, and the average internal rate of return, and then compare that with what the statement told him he was earning. Okay, here we go. So, what do we got? January 2021, there's your cost basis, $312. It's actually the prior year, but we're assuming no payments here because I want to see the growth. All right. It grew from $300,000 to $337,000. That was the accumulated value growth when I go back to that statement. Net cash value growth. So this column again, if I go back up, let's be transparent, net CV growth, $13,398. Here's what I want to touch on. The statement said, Mr. Client, you've earned $20,402. When we crunch the growth, meaning I had $300,000, I paid in $24,000, So that takes me up to 324. Another 13.4 is what gives me the actual value that I have in cash value, the 337. So how I look at it, saying, all right, what do I actually have? What's real? What's my money? If I'm comparing it to something simplistic like a bank account or just where I've got access to cash, this would be it. There's the net growth. So statement told me 20,402. Statement also told me I earned 6.86%. Did I earn 6.86%? We've got two things here. Underneath actual, we've got the average, this one's the annual, and then the average internal rate of return. So what we got here, internal rate of return, year 13 to 14, he earned a net return of 4.13%. So for that particular year, the statement told me 6.86%. After all insurance expenses, mortality charges, everything, that was his actual net internal rate of return that particular year. I want transparency there. If I'm told I've earned 6%, but then I see my actual growth, I start to break it down. I say, wait a minute, I earned 4. What is going through my head as a consumer, particularly toward the agent? Hey, you should know this. Why do I have to spend time trying to figure it out? It can be very frustrating in that respect. So we got to make sure as agents, as professionals, we're providing that information to our consumers. Now here's the biggie. Average, I just want to go back to this. Average internal rate of return, 1.12%. So how did we come up with that number? Let's crunch it actually. So he's paid in what? $24,000 per year. $13 years, 1.12%. So all we did was say, okay, I want the average by year 13. If I take that $24,000 per year payment, assume a 1.12% average, there we go, 337, 591. I'm off by 15 bucks. So we can round it up a little bit, but that's the average growth rate over the past 13 years. Now, if we ever see or hear about IULs over time, what do we often hear as far as the hyper-growth, tax-free income, the internal rate of return, the actual growth, much higher than 1%? Doesn't make any sense. That's the thing. Now, we can take a policy, design it differently, track the performance, make tweaks as we go. Now, this agent is very good from what the client tells us, looks at the annual statement, makes adjustments and such, and a lot of agents do that. But again, looking at actual performance for transparency here, the purpose of this case study right here is to say, when I see an annual statement that tells me I'm earning almost 7%, but then I see my growth for that year is a little over 4%, and my overall growth over the past 13 years has been just over 1% tax-free. Is it worth it? That's what I like to look at. And again, this is not to say, hey, whole life versus IUL, let's have a war here like we see all the time. They both have pros and cons. We don't sell IUL at our company, and this is why, because we have not seen it actually deliver in terms of real performance over time. And that's why I always go back to those 4 major mutuals, whole life insurance, well designed. That's where we've got the actual data, the actual proof. When we work with someone, we put a lot of value on treating their situation like our own. It's got to be proven and it has to work. We're not going to take a chance with someone else's money. Do it with my own money, right? But I'm not going to do it with someone else's. Like, forget that. No. So as far as transparency, main thing here, when we hear or see things to say, hey, the annual statement tells it all, like what more proof do you need in terms of real performance? It's like, no, the internal rate of return, actual policies that have lived the test of time, that's how we can dig in and get the real truth there. So I do hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, would like to see any custom samples, reach out anytime. And as always, I hope this helps. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, Please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.